Hi, this is Tom Nunziato from the Stark County ESC, and we're going to discuss SAS EVOS Teacher Value Added Reports. So first, I'm going to log into the Ohio EVOS dashboard, and we are going to be looking at a dummy practice account, but the information will look very similar to yours. When you first log in, you're logging in, and you're going to find that you're on the dashboard of the district. I'm going to come up to reports. And in my case, I'm going to do teacher search. And I have a particular teacher that I want to search, which is CIBCD. And this teacher is a middle school teacher who taught sixth grade mathematics last year with an effective level of green. So I'm going to click on that teacher. And I'm going to land on their landing spot of their teacher value added report. Get some general information up top. If I scroll down here a little bit so we could see everything on the page, we could see their 2021 and 2022 index, and we see our colors, yellow, green, and blue. What does that mean? Yellow means they had a growth index of less than -2. -2 to +2 is a growth index of expected growth, which is green. Above an index of +2 is light blue. Here, they had a -1.25. It may have been negative, but it still falls within the green band. And in 2022, they're almost exactly right on the 0 line. 0 is the expected growth line, and it was a -0.01. If we come down below, we see their growth measured in standard error. You may wonder, now wait a second, we said it was a -1.25. Well, the growth measure divided by the standard error becomes the index. So the teacher's students met expected growth by falling within the green band. Over here on the side, we could also see that the teacher was green. It says evidence that the teacher's students made growth as expected between a -2 and 2. And if we come back down here, we see the light blue means significant evidence. Green, there's evidence they fell between -2 and 2. Yellow is significant evidence that the teacher's students made less growth, which means it was less than a -2. If I click on this button and there is more teachers teaching the sixth grade math, you will see where the district average is. So in both cases in our example, this teacher's students fell below the district average. Now, that may not be, if you're in a district that's larger, you may be able to click that. Small districts may only have one teacher. It's an option that you have. Now, this data is showing us some trend, but it's not giving us information that we could work with. So we're going to come up to Teacher Diagnostics. And if you notice, it's going to break our groups into what's called tertiles, groups of 3, meaning 33% of the students in each of these groups based on the state of Ohio. So the blue represents 2022. The yellow represents 2021 in this example. Every year, they show you 2 years. Blue is always the most current, and the yellow is the previous year. Dotted lines are 2 standard errors. A solid line is 1 standard error. We're really only going to look at the 1 standard error, the solid whisker. And again, green is the expected growth. Over on the right, we see our groups. 32 students fell in the lowest group, or the lowest 33rd in the state of Ohio. So these 32 students fell on a 2-year average in the lowest 33rd in the state of Ohio, and then so forth. Here we have 1 student not used in the report. Well, teacher reports are strictly connected to your roster verification. So a teacher may roster verify to a student who does not have enough data but took the test, meaning in this case, this is a gain report because it was sixth grade mathematics, that student may not have had a previous year's test data, or the student was not in that teacher's room long enough. The teacher may have linked to it. So there's a variety of reasons. So by clicking this, you'll actually see who the student is, and you could have those professional conversations on why that student was not in the report. Now, when I look at my data, I notice that in 2022, my lowest group, the blue bar, is below the growth mark. Well, that doesn't mean as much as the solid whisker. This solid whisker is not touching this green line. So I am confident that these 32 students on average did not meet expected growth. Here we have the blue line that's just slightly above, but then our solid line is not only touching, but is on the above area of the green 0 growth mark, meaning that there's evidence that my students met or exceeded expected growth. And if I look at the highest group, you can notice that this line is not touching the green line at all. So there's significant evidence that this group of students met or exceeded the expected growth. So if we're looking at this report in 2022, the students that were in the higher to mid group met or exceeded expected growth. So discussions could be, what do we need to do to differentiate the information to help these students not only meet expected growth, but to exceed? Now, why do we look at the solid line? If you look in 2021 with this lowest group, the yellow bar was below the expected growth, but our confidence band, which is pretty big, has a standard error of 3.2, meaning there probably wasn't a lot of students. And if I click on it, or if I scroll down, I'll be able to see that we had less students in that group that year. But that line is touching or above the 0 line. So I'm confident my students' scores fell within this growth range. Yes, we'd like this bar above it, but they met or exceeded expected growth. Well, here, this was way below the 0 line. So these students in the previous years did not meet the expected growth. So you could have conversations that what happened that the middle group, not only in 2021 met expected growth, but seemed to exceed it. And even the high group grew a little bit more, but our low group did not. So there's some conversations that you could have based on this diagnostic. You could dig a little bit deeper. If you come over here and you see this triangle, you could drop down and see the students where they scored. And if I find a particular student, let's choose this one, I could also get some testing history. So the blue always represents the district, but it's what the district that student took the test. So in this example, in 21 in 5th grade, this student may have taken this test in a different district than you're teaching in, but we don't know that unless you know the student. This represents the building, the district, and the student. If you see, there was a giant drop from 3rd grade to 5th grade. What happened to 4th grade? Well, if you remember, in 2020, there was no testing due to the COVID virus. We have 21, see an increase. So the student grew from 2021 to 2022. We could actually look at that mathematically because their NCE was a 35 in 2021. And if it was expected growth, it would be the same, and 0 represents expected growth. So if this was a 35 again, that would mean the student met expected growth. But they went from a 35 to a 42, meaning that not only did they meet expected growth, but they exceeded it. And then here are our testing performance levels. So you could have conversations about this particular student. Now, many times you may wonder, well, I have I'm a smaller school. I only have one grade and one district. Well, a lot of times that your green and blue could be the same, as you see here, if you're a small district with only a single grade. But don't forget, there's other students that are taken in consideration when you're dealing with the building and the district, such as students that are testing outside of your building for a variety of reasons. They fall under other circumstances. So many times, if you're a single building, you may notice that these lines are the same, but sometimes they are not. We can make the assumption that in this example, this district had multiple fifth grade buildings that were taking this test. So that's why we have two, and possibly only one sixth grade building, maybe a middle school, where this building and district have the same data. But again, we can only make this assumption on this data. When you look at your data, you'll be able to see it and understand it clearly. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to be able to see. And I could do that with each student group that I like. Now, when it comes to looking at a teacher's value-added report and looking at whether or not you're using it for OTES, do not just look at the color and use that as a score in OTES. These colors are just giving you some guidance on where the students fall. Understand what the data means. You could look at subgroups when it comes to OTES, and you're able to filter out. And by doing that, you can go to Teacher Custom Diagnostics and list all the students. You could sort the students by exiting and percentiles, NCEs, performance levels. If you click student groups, you could choose groups to find students that are in some subgroups. You could even go into learning mode if you're a district that has hybrid, in-person, remote learning, so that you can do some comparison. If I chose, for instance, I'm going to just choose economically disadvantaged. I hit submit, and you're going to see the data. Now, in this case, the way it's shown is that the data at the top are the students that are considered economically disadvantaged. And it may be hard to see in this screen, but the students at the bottom half of the page, they're kind of grayed out, or their colors are lighter. That means those are still the students that are in the reports. But because, I'm going to scroll back up, I chose economically disadvantaged, they're not in the report, and so they're lighter or grayed out. If I come back to my diagnostics, I still have that filter, and I'm able to see where my economically disadvantaged students fell. And we have them across all three groups. If I hit the X, it clears them out, and I come back to the refreshing. I don't have to go to the diagnostic report. I could do it the custom diagnostic. I could do it right from the diagnostic tab, and I'm going to just choose students with disabilities, hit submit. And if you notice, my students with disabilities, where they fell. Now, let's look here. I have students with disabilities that actually fall in all three groups. It does not just fall in the lowest. Now, these students are not being represented by a bar because I have 5 or less students, and I need 6 students to get a bar. But I could see those students, see who they are, and be able to kind of dig into it to see, oh, this student has been labeled students with disability went from a 48 to a 48. Again, that is meeting expected growth, because zero growth or a 0 mathematically means expected growth. So 48 to a 48. These are different 48s. This is a 48 NCE in 5th grade. This is a 48 NCE in 6th grade. They represent different 48s, but staying on that 48 NCE means that they met expected growth. And again, I can go back out. I could clear it. And I'm back to my diagnostic report. Hopefully you found this information helpful. If you have any questions, please let us know.